Watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to episode 2 of Overanalyzing. This is a series I started a while back, and I've only done one other episode so far. And although I didn't intend for this series to be strictly about Red Dwarf, this episode is also about Red Dwarf, as was the first episode. Today I will be trying to explain the series' inconsistencies with in-universe logic. So I intend to cover up plot holes and fix inconsistencies using my own personal theories and a couple other things. Some of these are my own theories, others are the theories of the fan base in general, and others are things that are somewhat hinted at but not exactly confirmed. A lot of the inconsistencies will involve episodes such as Time Slides, Out of Time, Ticket to Ride, and Stasis Leak. Only be explaining certain inconsistencies, because other ones are not really explainable, and you can kind of shrug off. Like the fact that it's 2077 according to Series 2, whereas it's the 23rd century, before the 3 million year gap, of course, in every other series after that, except for Series 7, where it's the 22nd century. Not that any of that really matters, because they're 3 million years in the future from whatever the hell time period it's supposed to have started in anyway. I'll start by briefly re-mentioning my analysis from the first episode about the alphabeti spaghetti scene. Which, if you're still unaware because you either haven't seen the first episode or have just never watched Red Dwarf, that's the scene from Polymorph, where the Polymorph somehow attaches its tentacle onto Rimmer and takes out his anger. If you know about Red Dwarf, you know Rimmer is a hologram, and at that point in the series had no physical form. He was just a soft light hologram. And although logically he would have had a light be, that concept was not created until the next series. As I've mentioned in the previous episode, that was somewhat better done in the novels because the Polymorph went straight to Rimmer's memories in the hologram simulation suite instead of going to Rimmer himself. The theory I mentioned in that is I said that perhaps his light bead just happened to be right where the Polymorph hit him, which I guess is theoretically possible, but still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Snowman actually proposed another somewhat plausible theory where the Polymorph itself, since it can shift into anything, perhaps it shifted into a hologrammatic version of itself, because it has been established in the series that holograms can touch each other. Now let's move on to a plot hole, or rather something that's not really explained. In the episode Time Slide, somehow Rimmer became human at the end of the episode after changing the timelines relatively back to normal. There's actually an explanation given in the little guidebook that comes with Series 3. It explains that some fans have speculated that due to the fact that he met himself when he was younger, in the events of Time Slides, that helped him loosen up to the concept of his future self in Stasis Leak, which then allowed him to go to the Stasis booth, because he believed it to be real because he'd seen himself before, and be saved. Of course, he's immediately killed after this, so it's not really that relevant, but that's easily the best explanation there is. Now let's talk about my least favorite inconsistency, or retcon rather, as it sort of is. Lister and Kochanski's relationship has changed throughout the series. The first series Lister is my favorite. Simply a sad, lonely guy who could never get with the woman he loved. But according to Series 3, specifically the episode The Last Day, and onward, they apparently had a relationship for 3 weeks. This is one of the things that I least like about the retcons, but it's something I've learned to deal with. And although personally I like to pretend that didn't happen and it only applies to the alternate universe Kochanski, using a little bit of doublethink myself, regardless of what I think, it is still something within the series. And I have two possible scenarios that explain it. One of them is more likely than the other. The first scenario is when Rimmer altered the timelines in Time Slides, that caused some sort of butterfly effect that led to Lister's relationship with Kochanski changing. Now what Rimmer could have done that would have changed Lister's relationship, who knows? The slightest change in history can alter the timeline immensely. That is the explanation I will go with, because that episode takes place before The Last Day, whereas the next explanation takes place after, so it doesn't make as much sense. The next explanation involves Out of Time and Ticket to Ride, the events at the end of Out of Time, and what Lister explains at the beginning of Ticket to Ride. He mentions that with the way they blew themselves up, it changed the timelines and sort of merged the two universes together, causing time anomalies. This also could be used to explain Lister's relationship with Kochanski changing. However, I don't think it does, simply because that episode came much later. Now another small inconsistency. In Season 2, Rimmer mentions that his father committed suicide, or rather he uses the term that unfortunate suicide business. Or rather, he says that in Season 1, but in Season 2, he later learns his father died. Now, the explanation for that, I don't remember if it's been officially given or if it's just something that's been postulated, but the explanation about it is that Rimmer's father attempted to commit suicide but failed. and then he died later on in the Series 2 way. Another small one, Rimmer's parents' religions change from Seventh-day Advent Hoppus to the Church of Judas. Now, this one is a little bit more difficult to explain for a couple of reasons. Or rather, there are more explanations available, so it's hard to define which one would actually be accurate. Obviously, there's the possibility of changing the timelines in both time slides and out of time. The problem with that, however, is that Rimmer was already alive in time slides. It was after he was born, and they didn't change their religion at that point, I wouldn't imagine, because Rimmer already had the name Arnold Judas Rimmer, which is explained in Lemons because of the Church of Judas. Another very simple, easy way out explanation is that Rimmer was in fact joking about the Seventh-day Advent Hoppus. However, the one that is more plausible of time slides versus out of time, I'd say out of time makes more sense. However, there is a third explanation, or rather a third in-universe explanation. The third explanation depends on how the cliffhanger in Series 8 was resolved, because we still don't know for sure. But I'll be getting to that in a moment. And you ask yourself, one other thing I do want to mention is that I don't think they simply converted because Rimmer already had the name Judas, as I mentioned before. But anyway, in Series 8, Rimmer was recreated by the nanobots as a human. And in a deleted scene, we find that there were some things changed about him. For instance, according to a deleted scene, he had 3 sisters instead of 3 brothers. However, that was cut out because they didn't want that to confuse people or make them feel any less like it was the real Rimmer. Now, because of these changes, perhaps Rimmer has different memories of his family with a different religion, because, as they said in the deleted scene, he had 3 sisters instead of 3 brothers, according to his memory. And if you go on the deleted scene ending to Only the Good, the final episode of Series 8, Rimmer in fact ends up saving the crew by memorizing the term cesium francolithic, whatever the fuck that chemical is, to save them. And since Rimmer would have saved them in this hypothetical way that the cliffhanger is resolved, that perhaps would explain why he has different memories, because it would be that same Rimmer, theoretically, although somehow he would have died again to become a hologram. However, there's another theory about how the Series 8 cliffhanger is resolved involving Ace Rimmer, or rather the Rimmer from Series 1 through 7, returning and saving them. Which does make sense in Series 10 because he remembers the radiation leak, and he tries to take credit for saving them. Now, taking credit for saving them could just be either Rimmer's ego, or it could confirm the cutscene where he actually saved them using the chemical, or it confirms the Ace Rimmer unfilmed ending, which was originally going to be one of the endings. Now let's move on to what I consider to be one of the biggest inconsistencies in the series, the episode Stasis Leak. In Stasis Leak, they find a leak in the stasis booth that allows them to travel back in time to before the crew was wiped out. Upon going back in time, Lister discovers he has married Kochanski, or at least a future version of him has. And his future self tells him that they eventually, in 5 years' time, will find another way to go back in time. Which they do, in Out of Time, and Ticket to Ride as well, which is the time drive. However, perhaps due to the anomalies caused by their universes merging, and them killing themselves and corrupting the time-space continuum, that either rendered that a non-event, or maybe they decided they were too afraid to use the time drive after their future selves, which causes a paradox. Also, another thing I want to point out is how the hell did the time drive end up taking them back to Earth if it was originally just a time drive and not a faster-than-light drive? Or their future selves had, which I guess is fine because that was 15 years in the future. Maybe they found a faster-than-light drive. But there are 2 theories to that. Again, it goes back to the universes merging, because the time drive can take them anywhere after the universes merge, which I guess would kind of make sense since the original time drive that the future crew had was able to travel places as well. Or perhaps they used components of the matter paddle to reconfigure it, because it does kind of look like the matter, although the matter paddle does not have that much distance, so I don't know how they would have got back to Earth if that was the official explanation. Anyway, that's it for today's episode of Overanalyzing. There's plenty of other inconsistencies, retcons, and plot holes in the Red Dwarf universe, but these are what I feel are the main ones. Have a great rest of the day.
Subscribe, defeat it to Red Eye.